Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session on Indian legal history. Today, we are exploring a metamorphosis that changed the course of a nation, from merchants to monarchs. We'll be tracing the evolution of British charters, the East India Company, and how these commercial documents actually birthed the very foundation of the Indian legal system between 1600 and 1853. Let's get started. It's a common misconception that the British Empire in India was built overnight through a single conquest. In reality, it was legislated into existence, charter by charter. We can break this 250-year journey into three distinct phases. Phase 1, from 1600 to 1686, was the era of the traders, purely commercial survival. Phase 2, ending in 1753, saw the East India Company become the administrators, assuming civic duties out of necessity. Finally, Phase 3 marks the rise of the sovereigns, where the British Crown effectively absorbed the company's power to create a modern state. Let's look at the genesis. On December 31st, 1600, Queen Elizabeth granted a 15-year monopoly to the East India Company. Early on, their power was very limited, just simple fines and imprisonment for servants. If you committed a serious crime, you were sent back to England. However, by 1661, we see the judicial shift under King Charles II. He granted civil and criminal jurisdiction to the governor and council, and for the first time they could even execute capital punishment. This was the first time English law was applied to all inhabitants of the settlements. By 1683, piracy and interlopers, unlicensed traders, were becoming a major problem. King Charles II responded by granting the East India Company unprecedented martial powers. This established the Court of Admiralty. Interestingly, this court wasn't just made of lawyers. It was one civil law expert and two merchants. Their standard wasn't a strict code, but rather justice, equity, and good conscience. It gave the company sweeping rights to seize ships and even declare war on native rulers. Moving into Phase 2, we see the birth of municipal governance. The trigger? A revolt in Blacktown, Madras, over new house taxes. To placate the locals, the East India Company created the Madras Corporation. This introduced the mayor's court, consisting of one mayor and 12 aldermen. While it gave a semblance of representation, there was a major flaw. The judges were still merchants, not lawyers, and they remained entirely subservient to the East India Company executive. This table is crucial for your exams. Notice the jump from the 1687 Charter to the 1726 Charter. In 1687, authority came from the company and only applied to Madras. But in 1726, under King George I, these became royal courts, with a uniform system across Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta. Crucially, the final appeal moved from the local Admiralty Court to the King and Council in England. This officially linked the Indian and English legal systems for the first time. By 1753, the system needed a fix. Ambiguous jurisdiction was causing friction with native populations, so the 1753 Charter barred the mayor's court from hearing native versus native cases unless both parties consented. To help the poor who couldn't afford expensive litigation, they created the Court of Request for small claims under 5 pagodas. However, this charter also tightened the executive's grip, giving the governor more control over the appointment of the mayor. This is the turning point, 1774. The Regulating Act of 1773 birthed the Supreme Court of Judicature at Calcutta. This wasn't a court of laymen. It featured one Chief Justice and 3 professional barristers. It had jurisdiction over civil, criminal, admiralty, and even ecclesiastical matters. Most importantly, it was the first genuine attempt to separate the judiciary from the executive, making the court independent of the East India Company governor. In 1784, the British Crown decided it needed a tighter leash on the company. Pitt's India Act established a dual government. The East India Company's Court of Directors kept control of trade, but a new six-member Board of Control, led by the Crown, took over political, civil, and military affairs. This is when the phrase British possessions in India was first used, signaling the Crown's long-term territorial intent. The 1813 Charter brought massive economic and cultural shifts. Squeezed by Napoleon's blockade in Europe, Britain forced open Asian markets. The East India Company lost its 200-year trade monopoly, keeping only tea and the China trade. Culturally, this charter allocated 1 lakh rupees for education, framing it as a state responsibility for the first time, and officially permitted Christian missionaries to enter the country. 1833 was the death knell for the East India Company as a merchant. Their commercial functions were terminated entirely. They became a 100% administrative body. This charter centralized power by creating the Governor-General of India. It also established the first Indian Law Commission to codify our fragmented legal system, and notably, Section 87 banned discrimination in public employment based on religion or race. The final charter of 1853 set the stage for the modern Indian state. It separated executive functions from legislative ones for the first time, creating the 6-member Indian Legislative Council. It also ended the power of patronage, opening civil service positions to competitive examinations, the famous Macaulay Committee. The era of the company was clearly coming to an end. Let's summarize the judicial climb. We started with the factor rule, laymen guessing the law. Then came the Admiralty Courts with at least one legal expert. Then the Royal Mayor's Courts linked us to the Crown. And finally, the Supreme Court of 1774, which brought in professional barristers and true judicial independence. If you look at this graph, the story is clear. As the East India Company's commercial power plummeted, the Crown's political and territorial power soared. These charters weren't just licenses to sell spices. They were a slow, methodical mechanism for the British Crown to absorb a private corporation's assets and authority. So, what did we inherit? 3 pillars of the Republic of India: a unified legal code, an independent judiciary, and the civil service. The frameworks created to protect a private monopoly ironically became the administrative bedrock of modern India. Understanding this history is the key to understanding our law today.